Let's bring in someone else who knows a lot about Amazon right now. That is Anthony Chukumba. He is Loop Capital Managing Director. Anthony, it is great to have you here this morning to get your perspective on this story. One of the things that's been discussed with Bezos' stepping out of that day-to-day role is that he will not as much have to deal with the headache of pending regulation for Amazon, some of those regulatory threats from the Department of Justice, from the FTC, from the EU. How much do you think that plays into the decision, and how is Jassy going to do in that role?
So I don't think that probably made much of a difference to Bezos, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not sure if there's ever going to be any sort of optimal timing to leave, one of the largest and most successful and most widely covered companies in the world. But I highly doubt that was part of the decision. I think that this was, like you said, probably years in the making. In terms of, how Andy's going to handle it, I think it's going to be very similar to the way that Jeff handled it. I mean, I think that, Amazon, at the end of the day, they feel that they, are dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And quite frankly, in the worst case scenario, if the FTC, if the EU were to break up Amazon and let's say make them spin off AWS, that'd probably be a good thing, because I think that AWS would probably be valued a lot higher as a separate publicly traded company than it is as a part of Amazon.
Anthony, what have been your interactions with Andy Jassy through the years? What do you know about him? How might he lead the company differently than Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, funny story. I actually was in the same section as Andy at Harvard Business School. So our first year at Harvard Business School, we took all of our classes together for that entire first year. We socialized together as a section. We even played intramural sports together as a section. So, so I know him, I know him a little bit. Look, he joined Amazon right out of business school. And the funny thing was, I thought I was, master of the universe. I was going to work on Wall Street, move to New York. He was going to go work for this weird company I never heard of that sold books. Clearly, he made the right decision. And one of his early roles was, as a technical analyst to Jeff Bezos. So he was working, with Jeff pretty much every single day. He then, was, essentially invented cloud computing along with Jeff, and he's been running that business very successfully for many years. As you said, it's a small part of Amazon in terms of revenues, but it's the dominant part of Amazon in terms of profitability. And so, I always assumed that when this day came, that Andy would take over.
And, Anthony, talking about that AWS part of the business, you put in your note that bears are likely to highlight that it has grown at a slower rate than what we're seeing at Google Cloud, just with their results out yesterday with the Azure business. How are you thinking about those competitive pressures there for the AWS business specifically, which, as you just outlined, might be worth more were it not part of Amazon proper?
Well, we have to kind of put this in perspective. I mean, AWS grew 28% last quarter, and that was slower than Microsoft and Google. But with Google, they're losing money, right? So, where AWS is making a ton of money. With Microsoft, it's a little squishy in terms of what they call cloud. I'm not sure some of it's really cloud the way we think of cloud. The other thing that I would mention is that AWS is growing at a slower rate, but off of a much larger base. I mean, that business now on an annual run rate basis is an over $50 billion business. So I'm not really concerned about sort of Microsoft and Google nipping at AWS's heels, quite frankly.
Anthony, I want to come back to that idea of a potential split off if the company hand was forced, because I think that's a really intriguing idea. Do you think that their hand would need to be forced? I mean, is this something under an Andy Jassy that is more likely, that is a spinoff of AWS? And what would that look like? What would that mean for Amazon? What would the valuation of it be?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily more likely or less likely. I mean, obviously, yeah, he's been running that business for quite some time. He's very familiar with that business, but I'm not sure if that's going to be sort of the determining factor. I think that, if Amazon had their druthers, they would keep those businesses together. So I don't necessarily think this is something that they'll do, prophylactically. I think this will have to be something that they'll be forced by the government to do. In terms of the valuation, we haven't quite done the math yet. So I'm a little bit loath to give a precise answer on that, but it's going to be a big number. It's going to be a very, very big number. And like I said, I'm quite sure that the implied value of AWS as part of Amazon is not reflected in the stock price. It's not fully reflected.
Anthony, as a former analyst myself, I applauded you when you dropped coverage of GameStop a couple weeks ago. I mean, that was the right move. But now, as the volatility has subsided, are you going to relaunch coverage? And what are your thoughts on it now?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. GameStop has been a debacle of epic proportions. I was just reading that, Netflix and a couple other Hollywood studios are going to make a movie about GameStop. I'm hoping that I'm included in that movie and played by Denzel. But anyway, neither here nor there. I mean, look, the valuation completely disconnected from the fundamentals, and a bunch of individual investors got hurt. Now, hedge funds got hurt too, but at the end of the day, I'm not too worried about, these hedge fund guys. They're not, mortgaging their futures on whether, GameStop works or not. Individual investors are. And here's the scary thing, okay? GameStop hit a high of, I believe, over $480. Now it's down to a little less than $100. Last we checked, that stock's worth maybe $10 a share. So there's still a lot of downside to go. And I'm thanking my lucky stars I made that decision.
Well, thank you very much, Denzel. Anthony Chukumba this morning, Loop Capital Managing Director. Appreciate your time this morning on what is a busy one, I know. Thank you.